Yes, the enemy is trying to mix in with God's people, but believers in our Messiah are not the enemy. Okay, well, you say they're believers, but only the Most High know they're believers, but I digress. And I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about mixing with the enemies. An example I gave about Timothy had to do with arguing about his circumcision, which we knew regardless whether if you was a blood Israelite or not could be cut off if you was not circumcised. And that is what the argument was about. Had nothing to do with the fact that they did not acknowledge him because he was half-Jewish. Yes, it does. And that's why he had to get circumcised so he could be identified with the covenant. Why? Because the Israelites by covenant was supposed to be circumcised. That hasn't even changed today. I'm not saying you're going to lose your salvation if you're not circumcised, but it is a sign of the covenant. Well, you're going to say, well, it's the circumcision of the heart. No, that is the end result spiritually. But in the physical, the sign of the covenant is circumcision of the flesh. Just as your wife might wear a wedding ring or you wear a wedding ring, it is a sign of the covenant. That's what circumcision of the flesh is. It is a sign of the covenant. Come on now, this is Bible 101. Which brings me to another example. We know for a fact you don't need to be circumcised in the flesh in order to be saved or to be considered a child of God. And Paul would agree, and the only reason why he circumcised Timothy was because the Israelites could not get past their own ignorance. See, she done made up stuff again. That is not the only reason Paul circumcised Timothy. Timothy, according to Torah, had to be circumcised. Why? Because it is a sign of the covenant. Gentiles don't have to be circumcised because they were not at the mount. They did not sign the contract, but Israelites have to be circumcised. It is a sign of the covenant. So if that's no longer applicable, because again, what's the reason for the circumcision? Had nothing to do about being circumcised in the flesh. It had everything to do about what it represented. This is why we're circumcised in the heart. No, circumcision of the heart is the end result. It is the spiritual manifestation of a physical truth. But the sign of the covenant, go read it, the sign of the covenant is circumcision. And that's why they know who an Israelite is. You know, how many times they have to say, show me your thing. Come on now, go read the scripture. Show me your thing. Are you circumcised or not? Or are you uncircumcised? Why? It is a sign of who you are. Come on now. That ain't never changed. So when Father says don't mix with the other nations, that still applies. The problem is you don't see believing Gentiles as part of Israel. There is no distinction, so why do you keep putting them in with the other nations? There is a distinction. The distinction is the original branch and the wild grafted in branch. The distinction is the firstborn and the other children. The difference is the original people from the loins or the people who were grafted in or adopted. There is a distinction. Come on now. This is Bible 101. All right, so here's my reply. You misquoted Matthew 12:3-5 and Matthew 3:3. Yahusha referred to David eating the showbread and the priest working on the Sabbath to explain that mercy and spiritual understanding outweigh legalistic judgment. But Yahusha wasn't saying the law was done away with. He was exposing hypocrisy and lack of discernment. Yahusha never used these examples to cancel commandments. He used them to highlight how the spirit of the law must be understood in context. I got a whole teaching on that, but y'all don't want to read it. Go over to tailministries.com. I got a whole bunch of teaching on the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. But some of y'all don't want to go read that. You want to stick with your Eurocentric Christian doctrine. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. This is from Mark 2:27. Yahusha is emphasizing that the Sabbath is a gift, not a burden. It was given to Israel for rest and sanctification. Exodus 31:13. Saying this doesn't undo the Sabbath, it reminds us that we should not misuse it to condemn innocent acts. Or, condemn people for that, right? We shouldn't condemn people. That's what he was talking about. Go read it. Everybody in the Christian world want to read into what Paul's saying. Take Paul for what he said. Literally. Don't add to, don't take away. Yahushua upheld Torah and lived it. He wasn't giving permission to break the law, but correcting twisted interpretations of it. He was showing you how to obey the law, how to keep it, and how the letter of the law killed. Why? Because love comes in and overshadows the letter. As I've given in my articles and some of my teachings, the ox in the ditch being a good example, right? The law says you shouldn't do any work on the Sabbath, but the ox is going to die. So therefore, get the ox out of the ditch. Why? Because the love, which is the real reason for the law, love overshadows the letter. So love says, look, I know the Sabbath say don't do no work, but guess what? He gonna die if he stay in the ditch. Get him out. That's what it means by the spirit of the law. You ask, what makes us set apart? It is our blood or our mindset. This is what she said, right? The answer is both matters, but they are not the same. For thou art a holy people unto Yahuwah thy Elohim, and Yahuwah had chosen thee to be a peculiar people unto himself, above what? All nations that are upon the face of the earth. Deuteronomy 14:2. He didn't say inclusive of the Gentiles. Israel, the bloodline, is a peculiar people above all the nations that are upon the earth. Come on now. Israel was set apart by a bloodline and covenant. The Torah was given to a people, not just to individuals who chose to obey. Yes, behavior and obedience matter. Yes, circumcision of the heart matters, but the set-apart status of Israel was given to their descendants, even when they sinned. That's why Yahuwah says he will restore Jacob, not just whoever obeys. You don't never the Most High, you don't see the Most High ever say, I'm going to restore the Gentiles. It's all about Israel. The Bible is an Israelite book. Covenant identity is both inherited and lived out. You can't ignore one to justify the other. You say it had nothing to do with the blood. It was about the God they served. Let's look at Deuteronomy 7:3-4. You shall not give your daughters to their sons, for they will turn away your sons from following me. That is indeed about idolatry, but that does not mean bloodline is irrelevant. If it was only about idolatry, Yahuwah could have said, you can marry them if they worship me. He never said that. Yahuwah never said you can marry them if they worship me. Even in the Old Testament, when the sojourners came in, and even after they got circumcised, they still couldn't marry Israelites. But he didn't. There's no Torah commandment saying if the Gentile believes, then marry them. That's an assumption. She makes a lot of assumptions. I stick with Torah. There's no command that says, now that they're believers, you can marry them. That is your assumption. Also, the case of Ezra and Nehemiah shows that even if the foreign wives lived among Israel, they were still put away. That included the children. That's not just about religion. That's about protecting the holy seed, Ezra 9:2. That is about protecting the holy seed. That's why they got rid of the Gentile women. That's why they got rid of the Gentile children. Because it's about protecting the holy seed. Come on now. Y'all got to get past this Christian interpretation of doctrine and read it for yourself. Believing Gentiles are not the same as natural Israel. Below is where we have confusion. The problem is you don't see believing Gentiles as part of Israel. That's what she told me, right? The problem is you don't see believing Gentiles as a part of Israel. This is what I told, right? Because I don't. They are part of the citizenry, but they're not Israel. right? She thinks they're Israel. They don't become Israel. You have adopted a replacement theology, whether you realize it or not. Paul does teach that Gentiles can be grafted in, Romans 11, but he also says, do not boast against the natural branches. You do not support the root, but the root supports you. Therefore, showing a distinction between the original covenant people and the wild grafted in branches. Gentiles do not become natural Israel by belief. They become partakers in the spiritual blessings, but tribal inheritance, land rights, and seed lines still belong to Jacob's descendants. Yahuwah is restoring the 12 tribes, not blurring the lines into a generic everyone who believes is now Israel. See, this is the whole thing about Torah. Yahusha is restoring the dead nation of Israel. Go read Ezekiel chapter 37. He's not restoring the Gentiles. He's restoring the hidden ones. He's restoring the ones that they caused the memory of them to cease from among men. This book is about Israel. Circumcision of the heart replaces circumcision of the flesh. That's what she said. And I say no, it fulfills the spiritual intent. But it doesn't erase physical identity. Paul taught that circumcision of the heart is what matters what? For righteousness. But he also circumcised Timothy because of the Yahudim, Acts 16:3. Meaning lineage still carries social and covenantal weight. Why? Because circumcision was a sign of the covenant. It was still required for Israel. If circumcision was totally irrelevant, Paul would have rebuked the Jews instead of complying. But he understood that lineage and order still matters, even while preaching the spiritual elevation of all believers. Now let me explain to you why circumcision is not just of the heart, but physical for Israel. Because they were keeping Torah. That's why in Acts 21, they came and said, look, Paul, they're saying that you're teaching people not to obey what? The laws of Moses. And Paul said, okay, in order to prove that I'm not teaching that and I'm teaching people to obey the covenant, go get these few guys, right, so that they can go through the rite of circumcision. If being circumcised physically didn't matter, why in Acts 21 did Paul tell them to go and get circumcised? Because it's covenant. So to correct your misunderstanding, Yahusha didn't cancel the law. He taught how to rightly apply it. Israel is set apart by both bloodline and obedience. Gentiles who believe are grafted in, but they do not erase Israel's identity. Torah never commands Israelites to marry believers from other nations, even believing Gentiles. Ezra, Nehemiah, Deuteronomy, and Paul all showed that covenant order, bloodline, and seed still matters, especially in marriage and inheritance. So yes, believing Gentiles can be accepted by Yahuwah, but that does not grant them the right to intermarry with Israel, because being grafted in is not the same as being born into the house of Jacob. That distinction still stands. Just because you adopted in, don't mean you the original. Just because you adopted in, don't mean that your family was at Mount Sinai signing the contract. Israel is Yahuwah's firstborn, Exodus 4:22. This means Israel holds the inheritance rights, the authority, and the responsibility of the firstborn in the father's household. I got a teaching on the right of the firstborn. Go watch that. Believing Gentiles are like adopted children brought into the same household. Romans 11, Ephesians 2:12-19. They are welcomed, they are loved, they are included, but they do not replace the firstborn. I mean, that's logic, right? That's logic. That's logic. If I'm an adopted kid, he's not going to replace my original kid. He's not going to take the same inheritance that the bloodline has. That's logic 101. They live under the same rules and benefit from the blessings of the household, but the firstborn retains his unique position. Just as in a family, the biological firstborn has inheritance by birthright. The adopted children share in the father's love and receive care and place in the family. But the adopted children don't inherit the firstborn's authority or land unless the father says so, and they don't erase the bloodline. See, this is supersessionism she's talking about, right? She wants to replace the bloodline. The people who the original covenant was with. The people who broke the covenant and went into slavery for breaking the covenant. Somebody make it make sense to me. This honors both Yahuwah's promises to Israel and his mercy to the nation. So you got a group of people who signed a contract at Mount Sinai. And according to Deuteronomy 28, says, if you obey, then you're going to be blessed. If you don't obey, you're going to be cursed. If you don't obey, you're going into slavery worldwide. So them same people break the covenant according to the contract, go into worldwide slavery according to the contract. But now all of a sudden, believing Gentiles come in, don't have to go through captivity, don't have to go through slavery, don't have to lose their children, don't have to lose their inheritance.